Hello everyone, my name is Miranda, but you probably know me better by my Instagram name at Mother of Serpants. Before I get into today's video, I would just like to say that I will no longer be Mother of Serpants pretty soon because I am selling Serpants. Serpants is a 2018 cinnamon pied ball python. He weighs 414 grams and was produced last year by Bob Vu. He eats frozen thawed rats every week. The reason why I am selling him is because I originally purchased him after I sold Lady Ludwig. Lady Ludwig is a black pastel pied, but since I'm getting her back, I'm deciding to let Serpants go, as well as the fact that I do enjoy the black pastel gene more than the cinnamon gene. He is a very, very healthy, beautiful animal, and I'm kind of sad to see him go, but I do know that it is the right decision to let someone else love him. If you have any questions or info or just want to talk about pricing, please send me a private message on Instagram, Twitter, and I will also link my Morph Market page below. Also, if you are in the market to buy more ball pythons, I once again would like to recommend Mandy's Morphs. The link to her Morph Market will also be below in the description. So go check her out. She has a lot of amazing animals that she is currently selling. You don't want to miss out. She's extremely responsive to messages. She will always get back to you, and she goes above and beyond to make sure that you are comfortable and happy during every single experience. So please go check out some awesome snakes if you are looking to buy some. I'm gonna show some quick footage of Serpants just to try to get some offers in on him. I would really like him to go to a good home, and I'm going to be extremely picky about who he goes to, so don't be surprised if you offer me. If you we talk about it and I ask a lot of questions, and I'm very inquisitive about what he's going to be in for an enclosure as well as care, because I am going to be extremely choosy about who he goes to. This is my personal pet, and I'm not just going to mail him out to the first person who offers me money. I'm just now realizing that I probably sound super weird in this video, and that's because I've had, I've had a really bad cold for the past week, laryngitis, I believe, and I have not had a voice for like 5 days, and yesterday was the first day. I don't know when this video is going to come out, but yesterday was March 18th. That was the first day that I had been able to talk since Wednesday night. Yeah, since Wednesday night. And my voice is back and I'm feeling a lot better. Obviously still not 100%, but just the fact that I am able to talk, I'm extremely happy about. So I just wanted to film a video and get this information out there. Okay, so I did have Serpants out earlier to take photos of him, so I will not have him out for the remainder of the video, just because, as I've mentioned before, he is a snake that does tend to get stressed out a bit easily. He definitely doesn't tolerate handling as well as some of my other snakes. So for that reason here, I have out Hodor. He's got his eyes on me. He doesn't want to face the camera and show off those pretty silver eyes, but, oh, there he goes. Hodor is my jungle Aneri het snow boa constrictor. He is the only snake that I currently have that is not a ball python, and I love him to pieces. He's probably one of my favorite snakes that I have next to Elton. Every time I have him out, I just want to like give him a big hug. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about live versus frozen feeding and kind of the debate that one is better than the other. I want to start off by saying that is not true. As long as your snake is eating, there really isn't one that's better than the other. If they eat live, then that's great. If they eat frozen, then that's great. There are some snakes that will only eat live. Likewise, there are some snakes that will only eat frozen. There are pros and cons to each, and I'm really going to talk more about the pros and cons to each one. So what prompted me to make this video is a lot of people generally think that feeding frozen is a safer, better option than feeding live because there aren't as many risks, and this is actually false. There are probably just as many risks as feeding frozen as there are live. I'm not sure if you... I don't know what Hodor is doing. So if you check out, it's the Facebook group Ball Python Enthusiasts, there was a post last week, I believe, about how a woman who is unnamed, she fed her snakes frozen thawed, as she always has. The frozen thawed was purchased from her large distributor Frozen Seller, and at this point in time, I believe, is still unnamed. Or after she fed her snakes, all of them regurgitated and 2 of them actually passed away. So because of this, so many people are under the impression that feeding frozen is much, much safer than it is to feed live, And no, of course, again, there's pros and cons to each of them, so I'm going to go ahead and go over the pros and cons to live and frozen feeding. Let's start out by going over live feeding and the pros. It is more natural. The snakes get a natural experience, especially if there are some that have that like born killing instinct, and there are some that have really strong feeding responses. It can be good for them to feed live. Some of them don't have as strong a feeding response if you feed them frozen. Similarly, if a snake is fasting and you're only trying to feed frozen, sometimes a feeding live will jumpstart that feeding response. It will help to get a snake back on food. Hodor is just zeroed in on my face. I don't really know why, but oh my goodness, I love the snake so much. Look at him. Look at the camera, buddy. He's such a good boy. Anyway, feeding live is also quicker, and there is not as much preparation as there is in feeding frozen. So most of the time you just grab the prey and then you toss it in. Well, humanely, obviously, you don't just like wing it in, but you just toss it in and then kind of nature will take its course. Generally, live is safer in terms that you don't have to worry about the snake being poisoned. And I don't really mean like poisoned as in there's like chemicals or whatever inside the rat. I will kind of get into that when I talk about feeding frozen. But a lot of times, if you feed a snake live and the snake isn't injured by teeth or claws, usually it's going to be pretty safe. You don't really have that much to worry about. However, of course, there are also cons to feeding live, and these are: one, if you live in an area where live is not as accessible. I know for me and for many other people in New England, it's very difficult to get your hands on a supply of live feeders. Some pet stores, they are extremely against any sort of live feeding, so they will not sell you mice. And if they notice that you keep coming in and buying mice weekly, they will ban you from buying any sort of rodent because they don't want them to be used as feeders. They really say that your snake should be feeding frozen, but of course we as snake keepers know that not all snakes will eat frozen. So also in Maine, and I'm not sure about the rest of New England, you can no longer buy live rats in chain pet stores such as PetSmart or Petco. So if your snake is larger and you need supply to a larger rodent that will only eat live, that of course you're gonna have to figure something out, probably from a private seller. So that's definitely a large con about feeding live, is that it's not very accessible and it can be very difficult to get a constant supply. And this is something that if you plan on breeding snakes is very important, because a lot of times to kind of jumpstart the hatchlings into the feeding process, you really need access to live food. So another con when it comes to live feeding is that there is the risk of injury for snakes if you are not supervising the feeding. If the rats and even mice, they have very sharp teeth and claws that can injure snakes and cause infection. So it's very important that if you do live feed, obviously don't be like a helicopter parent or anything, but you do want to be monitoring the situation, just kind of watching from afar to intervene if anything were to happen and if you need to remove the feeder quickly. A live feeder should never be left unsupervised due to any circumstances with a snake, and obviously if the snake does not eat, you need to remove the feeder. You can't just leave it in there and think that the snake will eat it when it is ready. That is not the case. You need to be vigilant and remove the problem before it happens. Also, I needed to add this as a con, even though I think it's a bit silly. A lot of people, a con of feeding live, they think that it is like killing an animal. A lot of people think that it is cruel and inhumane, even though there's really no difference between how the rat dies. Either way, a rat or mouse is being fed to a snake. So again, I've said it before, but if this is an issue, if you're not really okay with feeding live, then you should probably reconsider if a snake is a good pet for you. Now we can move on to the pros and cons of feeding frozen thawed. So to start off, it is definitely a lot more easy and accessible than it is to get live. Most pet stores will sell a supply of frozen. It is usually very expensive, but it's still a lot easier to get than access to live. There are also plenty of suppliers online that have frozen that you can easily buy. You really aren't going to have an issue with finding frozen like you might with live. You will be able to find literally anything from mice to rats to chickens to quail. You can really, the supply of frozen is endless compared to what it might be to try to find live. Also, it is definitely safer in terms that you don't have to worry about the food harming your snake. A frozen rat or mouse is not going to bite and claw the same way that a live one will. Also, you don't get the guilt that some people do when they have to feed live. You just, basically, it's a lot easier for some people to process if it's already dead. Hodor, he wants kisses or something, Okay, he just wants to climb, that's all he wants to do. Hodor, boa constrictors are semi-arboreal, and Hodor has always loved to climb. Now to the cons of feeding frozen, and this is one that people don't really think about. They kind of are under the impression that every time you get frozen that it's going to be all perfectly like cared for, and that the only thing you need to do is thaw them out overnight, blah 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 blah. And this is not the case, because there have been instances where shipments have thawed and then frozen again. And if you don't know this, if you have a feeder that thaws out, you should never refreeze it and reuse it. This can kill your snake or cause it to regurgitate. You should always just get a new feeder if this happens. And you can't really tell if like mice and feeders, if they have been frozen and re-thawed again. So this can be extremely dangerous, because without knowing, and if you thaw it out and then feed it to your snake, and you have like a large number of snakes and you feed it to all of them, then you run the risk of losing your entire collection. And this has happened before. Bad frozen feeders have wiped out entire collections. They have killed multiple snakes in one sitting. And it's really scary to think about. And this is part of the reason why I am transitioning to breeding my own feeders and feeding live, is because just about every frozen distributor has at some point in time had a scandal where bad feeders have been mailed out. And this is not something that has done intentionally. They don't do this to try to harm people's snakes. It's just honest accidents that unfortunately end with situations like these. And I would just like to once again reiterate that I'm in no way promoting live feeding and saying that one is better than the other. Both obviously come with their own risks, and this is just like my opinion and the info that I have gathered through just kind of like months and months of watching different sort of scandals take place. Anyway, another con with frozen is that it's extremely time consuming. It's extremely time consuming, and then you have to like clean up everything after and disinfect, and it's just a lot of work. But obviously, if you have a large heart and you are not okay with live feeding, or your heart just can't take it, which I do understand, then frozen is definitely a good alternative, and it is obviously worth the extra minutes and hours of cleanup and preparation than it is to watch an animal get eaten alive. No one should be able to make you feel bad no matter what you choose to feed, because there are so many people whose snakes won't eat that you should celebrate the fact that yours is. I think that it should be up to each keeper to kind of determine what they want to feed for their own collection and their own snakes. So I think that about covers it for today's video. If anyone has any suggestions for next week's video, let me know. Until then, in the meantime, take care guys, bye.